Hey y'all, Boogie Night here, how's it going? And there have been a lot of firsts that have happened in my life, and tonight was another first. And that was the first Dario Argento movie that ever disappointed me. That being said, so Morges and I saw Four Flies on Grey Velvet, which is the third movie in Dario Argento's first directorial trilogy. That is, as I've said in the last review, the Animal trilogy. This was also the eighth Argento movie I think I've seen, so I have a pretty decent resume when it comes to knowing what his Giallo movies are like, from the cinematography to the character and reaction. I've now seen the entire Animal trilogy, I've seen the entire Three Mothers trilogy, I've seen Tenebrae, and there's one more movie of his that slipping my mind, but needless to say, each Dario movie that I've seen has its own little signature to it. This one didn't. This was a movie, and this was an actual quote that Morges and I both said to each other on Discord while we were watching this, was, we would rather be watching Cannibal Holocaust in this movie. Let that sink in for a moment. If you would rather be sitting through a cannibal exploitation movie than watch a Giallo film, that's how bad this movie disappointed us. And like when I did the Cat o' Nine Tails review, I wasn't planning on doing a review of it, but I liked it so much and I had so many positive things to say about it. This is the complete opposite. I have nothing but bad things to say about it. Which really sucks, because you had Bird with the Crystal Plumage, which was, it wasn't bad. It was just, once again, Dario's directorial debut, and he definitely was kind of trying to feel himself out and whatnot. But Cat o' Nine Tails was just exponentially better. So you would at least expect the third movie, Four Flies on Grey Velvet, to kind of be somewhere between the two of them. Like, maybe he's still kind of deciding what he wants to do. No, this was a straight at the bottom of the barrel. This is a movie I would not recommend. This movie made Lizard in a woman's skin look like, well, admit it looked like friggin' Inferno, for crying out loud. If I have something complimentary to say about Lucio Fulci, that's going to tell you about the type of caliber movie that I just witnessed. I mean, it got off to such a good start, too. I mean, the first 10-15 minutes were your amazing Argento side of things, amazing camera angles from the top-down POV shot that happened in the first 5 minutes. There is a scene where the camera's pretty much on the ground to a lit cigarette that's slowly burning out while the main character walks down a darkened alley. You had those great shots, and then it just got very sloppy after that first opening scene. And to add to that, in the opening scene, Ennio Morricone was still doing the soundtrack for it, and he had the same creepy vibe from Cat o' Nine Tails. That very kind of, you just feel your hair kind of stand up on end, you get the goosebumps, you're not sure what's going to happen next, and then it just kind of craps out. And the only thing that I can think of off the top of my head, and this is after having the conversation with Morges about it, and then thinking about it a little bit more while I had dinner, was that he had a much better budget for Cat o' Nine Tails, and he still had some money left over. So rather than just leave it at after Cat o' Nine Tails and maybe put the back into the budget for later, he decided to use the remainder of it on another movie, shoot it very quickly so it came out the same year, and decided to turn it into the trilogy. And that was this third movie. It was what was left of the budget, and it was so apparent between the screenwriting, the camera, the cinematography, the characters, the action, and even the music towards the end. I don't know what happened. I mean, I'm getting ahead of myself. Now, I've talked a little bit about the first scene, and that was easily the best part of it. And then after the first one, well, like I said, gone. So, let me start by talking about just the overall concept of Four Flies on Grey Velvet. It starts out, you think that it's going to be kind of like a blackmail case or another murder investigation very similar to something Paolo Cavada or Mario Bava would do. And then Dario Argento had so many other ideas to go into this that he just decided to throw every little thing into it at the same time. So there are scenes that make no sense. There are just scenes that are there for maybe 5 seconds, a 5-second cutaway to something that happens, and then back to the main character, or something completely different. It would be like as if you were watching a Godfrey Ho movie with just the different cutaways with different plot points. But whereas with a Godfrey Ho movie, somehow they all kind of come together at the very end, or it's comedic. This movie just left us scratching our heads, just certain things that had nothing to do with the overarching plot. And even so, speaking of plot points, which I'll get into later on, it was another complete disappointment to the Giallo subgenre. I had such high hopes, and Dario, you're better than this, man. You were so much better. You showed your mettle in Cat O' Nine Tails. Why did you just dilute yourself with this? Was it just to push out one more movie in 1971? Were you trying to be like Uwe Boll? Did you have anonymous investors that could give you a tax break on just how bad and poorly orchestrated this movie was? Because that's what it felt like. I mean, once again, and I've seen quite a few Godfrey Ho movies, and yes, those are awesomely bad, as longtime viewers know. But this felt like what could only be described as a Godfrey Ho-sploitation film because it had all those elements of it, but was poorly executed. And I'm saying poorly executed from a movie like Ninja Terminator or Ninja Champion or the American Commando trilogy. Now, that being said, let's talk a little bit more about the cinematography. And I am not a big snob when it comes to camera angles. It doesn't have to break the mold, it doesn't have to split the atom, but it has to be decent. I don't want to feel queasy or feel like I'm getting motion sickness after I just rode Mission Space Orange at Epcot with a hangover or something like that. And that's kind of what it felt like. There were a lot of little different flash cuts back and forth, and I should have seen this coming because during the opening montage where they're talking about the directors and the screenwriters and the music and whatnot, and it's showing the characters playing in a band, which can only be described as like a cover band to Foreigner. Like, I literally said this to Morgas. I'm like, hey, maybe they should bust in a Jukebox Hero. Which is not an insult because I do love the band Foreigner. I mean, come on. Feels Like the First Time, Jukebox Hero, Cold as Ice. I mean, come on, you can't go wrong with them. But then it would just suddenly flash cut to just a black screen and a slowly beating heart. And that happened at least 3 times throughout the course of the first 2 minutes of the movie. And there would just be awkward cutaways to a close-up of somebody's face and suddenly just panning very fast down the street. And then it would flash cut to scenes where you'd see characters 5 seconds before those scenes were empty. There was a scene with a woman, I don't know what her purpose was. She was sitting on a bench waiting, and it was a park full of people. There were kids. There was a perverted old man helping on some kid on a merry-go-round. There was a couple in the trees making out. And 5-10 seconds later, suddenly, boom, music budget ran out, and the park is devoid of all life. It just felt like these things were done for dramatic effect, but they didn't think things through. There was no build-up on that. It was just, boom, done. Excuse me, y'all. I'm still getting over my weird throat cold. It's just, it wasn't thought out right. And that's what it just came out as being lazily done. Like, okay, next group. Okay, bring them in. Action. Cut. Okay, you're done. Okay, next scene. I mean, it's like in Bird in the Crystal Plumage. Bring in the perverts. Speaking of which, pervert count in this movie, 8. It was just badly done. And to add to the cinematography and the camera angles and the weird zoom stuff was the lighting was poor. It could go from, you know, it literally was, there was one scene, the park scene that I'm talking about. It went from broad daylight, well, kind of cloudy, sun slowly going down, and then all of a sudden it's pitch dark, and she's running through what looks like a hedge maze. It really made absolutely no sense. There was no sense of time. And even if there was some sort of mad speed up of time like that, like there was a like a time lapse or something like that, how is it all of a sudden going from slightly cloudy to pitch dark? It was just like somebody just flipped the light switch and all of a sudden there she is. And why is she running? Who is she running from? There was no sense of footsteps. There was nothing like that. And once again, there's just a series of flash cuts, which was just mind-numbing. It was it got to the point throughout the course of the movie with just all these weird little scenes happening that it kind of almost gave me flashbacks to when Josh Wasabi, Morges, and I watched Monkey King with 72 Magic, alright? And I know I've talked about this in my previous Giallo reviews, is that they offer these little different sub-motives and subplots and different plot twists to thoroughly just confuse you and make you think, is this why this is happening? Is this why this is happening? There was no head scratchers. It was just, that makes no sense. That could be related to the main plot. Probably not. Possibly this, possibly that, I don't know. And speaking of which, the ending of the movie, the main reason why everything is happening with the deaths and the investigations and the blackmail that happens, and even so, it's not even fully explained why this is happening. The end plot twist has nothing to do with the actual goings on with the movie. It was like blood and black lace. You had so many different things happening all at once to throw you off, and then you get smacked on the back of the head. Oh, and speaking of getting smacked on the back of the head, I have one more thing to say about the cinematography that really pissed me off. I talked about the first-person POV shot in Cat O' Nine Tails. There was another first-person POV shot in this movie. But whereas how smoothly orchestrated it was in Cat O' Nine Tails, and I think there's also a nice POV scene that happened similarly to... Oh, in Suspiria, yeah. When the blind man got killed by his dog. That was expertly executed. This looked like Hardcore Henry was shot on Shidio. And if you haven't seen Hardcore Henry, oh boy, that one's a doozy. Because that movie is also shot 100% in first-person POV. Now, speaking of Blood and Black Lace, in my review of that, I talked about how I despised all the characters and was rooting for the killer. Once again, that was happening in this movie. Morges and I both agree that every character in this movie was just downright reprehensible. The main character, who kind of looked like Greg Lake from Emerson, Lake and Palmer, complete with the mop haircut. Sorry, Greg, I love ELP, one of my favorite bands and biggest inspirations, musically speaking. He was just dead and emotionless. He was the most static character to the point I think he had alexithymia. He was rude to his wife. His wife kind of had this little damsel in distress kind of ditzy blonde, like, oh my god thing kind of going on. All his other bandmates were complete D-bags. I mean, they would have these parties. There were 2 scenes of parties where they would just have random groupies over, despite the main character, Roberto, being married to the ditzy blonde Nina. And they would tell rape stories. They would say, oh, this is a story about how Frankenstein raped this girl, or maybe the doctor thought maybe the monster was gay. That was an actual line from the movie. Maybe they thought the monster was queer. But no, he just liked to rape. This was done seconds after talking about, just casually, how a murder recently occurred and it was in the papers. Or they found it one of their friends died, or maybe it was one of their housemaids that died, or something like that. You had Nina's cousin, who was staying with Roberto after Nina left because she was scared for her life. And she's like, no, I've got standards. And then literally 3 minutes later, they're making a 2-backed monster that is Roberto and the cousin in the bathtub, even though she fully is aware that he is married to her cousin. And they still decide to go at it like Catholic jackrabbits. I mean, who does this? This is something I would expect from a Lucio Fulci movie, or an Uwe Boll movie, or maybe even a Bruno Mattei movie. Or, God forbid, an Andreas Schnaas movie. There was just times with the character interaction where they were so reprehensible. I felt like I was watching Island of Death. And also, in Cat O' Nine Tails, Dario Argento did a great job integrating the LGBTQ community. I thought it was very expertly done. There were a few scenes that it was done very well with it. And particularly since this was in the 70s, and that was still kind of a topic that wasn't often discussed, particularly in movies. This one just did a face heel turn, a 180, and painted the LGBT community in the most stereotypical and negative kind of way. The first time when Roberto meets the public investigator, he just walks in. He's literally like goes like, "Oh, hello. Have you ever had?" And literally a question he asked Roberto was, "Have you ever had a homosexual experience?" Or, "You're such a heterosexual." It was just playing on this negative and pejorative trope that was something that was done in Cat of Nine Tails so flawlessly between the plot, the character interaction, and in this one, you're just like, what? Why? You know? It just ties into how douchey some of these characters were. Like, whoever was in charge of casting did not do the research, did not even look at the screenplay, just thought, you fit the stereotype, you fit the stereotype, you fit the stereotype, you could fit the stereotype. It just makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. It was just, everything was so lazily done. It's not even worth me going into the plot because I don't even understand the plot in a nutshell. Long story short, Roberto chases down a creeper, basically, inadvertently kills him, and a person in a doll mask that kind of looks like the Pip Boy from the Fallout series, or as Morges and I called it, Pip Perv 2000. Oh, come on, we had to have a little bit of fun with that. Takes a picture in what you think is starting off with a blackmail movie, turns into every person that gets close to Roberto gets killed. And it's not even just the people that are trying to investigate the blackmail. He actually he actually hires this one hippie who pretty much, as Morges pointed out, looks like Bud Spencer. It was Bud Spencer playing a Richard Kiel character. Bud Spencer was the only redeeming thing in this movie because he would just come in at the most random times, make these gruff statements like, "You weakling," or "Do you have guts? You city people don't know what it's like to have real food." It's like, I would rather see this movie to see Bud Spencer just react to things, because that was the only thing that was worth laughing at. But once again, had nothing to do with the plot. So this murder investigation, everybody's dying around Roberto, and you're grasping at straws about, does this scene have a plot point to it? Is this one of the Giallo plot twists? Is this a plot twist? Is this a motive? No. At the very end of the movie, you find out that Nina, his wife, had daddy issues, which are only intercut by various scenes, such as basically a flash cut to a padded room at an asylum, spinning around in circles in a gruff voice that almost sounded like Bud Spencer's character, saying like, "I wish I had a son." Turns out that she was so plagued by these issues that she was somehow needed to take it out on her husband, when it was never fully explained what the trigger points were, how it related to her dressed up as Pip Perv 2000, or if Pip Perv 2000 really was her, if she really did witness him kill this creeper. Excuse me. Whew. But it was so confusing to it that there's absolutely nothing redeemable about this movie. It was reprehensible, it was poorly executed, it was lazily done. The characters were complete D-bags. I was cheering on the killer until I found out it was Nina. There were little to no special effects, and even if you did get a special effect, it was after a sudden flash cut away, flash cut back, so it's like somebody could have gotten smacked in the head and beaten to death, or garroted with piano wire, and it cuts away to a cat walking down the street, then cut back and there's blood on their face. I mean, this was just... I keep repeating myself, but if you're gonna see a Giallo movie based on the ones I have seen, and not just the Argento ones, I'm talking about the Paolo Cavada movies, I'm talking about Bruno Mattei, I'm talking about Mario Bob, I'm talking about, what's his name? something Lenzi. Sorry, the name's not ringing a bell in my head right now. Morges brought it up the other day. You should at least be slightly familiar and expecting certain things to happen, as is the overall nature of what a Giallo movie is. This did none of it. And I am sorry for all the hardcore Argento fans out there, because I am too. That's why I am so critical of this one particular movie, because it had so much potential. And you had the expectation after the first 15 minutes that it was going to keep going down that pike, even if it plateaued. But no, it dropped off a cliff. The ball dropped after the 15-minute mark, and it was just rolling in a ditch somewhere with the rest of the turds. Wow, that actually felt good getting that off my chest. But this is going to be the last Giallo review I do for a while. There's a couple other ones coming up. I still need to do my review that I was supposed to do over the weekend that I haven't gotten around to doing. And then next week, depending on how it goes, I'll have another one coming up after that. But anyways, that being said, I'm actually going to try and relax a little bit for the rest of the evening. So with that being said, y'all have a wonderful night, and I'll catch you in the flip side, all right? Peace.